When the humans started spreading out to live on other species' worlds, to include our home world, we believed they would be easy to manipulate. At first, it was easy to get them to sacrifice their time, their labor, their resources, and make our lives just a little bit easier. This was surprising as they are primarily carnivores and we're strictly herbivores. Somehow, their carnivorous beings seemed to like living around us. It was odd. We didn't understand it. It also wasn't long before we found out that the humans found our form to be, what's the words they use? Oh, yes, cute, adorable, fluffy, although that's in reference to our tails and ears, and of course, things like attractive, hot, and sexy. Since our appearance is an amalgamation of primarily what humans look like, yet we have characteristics of a creature they have on their own planet called a bunny, or they call it a rabbit. I have seen pictures, and we do have a few of these characteristics, but not many. Thankfully, we don't have any fur beyond our heads, ears, and tails. The humans seem to like this too, as they find it more appealing. The humans got along with everyone as they like the idea of peace. It seems that so much war and fighting has exhausted them so much that they're almost repulsed by it. Yet you wouldn't know that if you broke one of the human societal rules, and they still had their own set of societal rules that they followed. A few that I have heard from the humans and I know pretty well now are pretty self explanatory when you break them down. One like, do not willingly damage another's transportation. When my human friend Jake found that someone had taken a heavy object to his vehicle, I said, "You seem to have a ding in your fender." He responded as he seemed to be preparing for a fight. "They trashed my car, Alfred, between a couple of guys. That's real personal." I watched him travel over to the other human who had damaged his vehicle, and the resulting violence between them only ended as the female weapon they were fighting over told them both to stop. As soon as she stepped in between, it's though someone hit a pause button and they both just seemed to freeze in place. I didn't understand how they could possibly just stop the way they did with their aggressive feelings, yet the aggressive feelings seemed to never actually go away. When I inquired why the grudge, Jake told me, "You don't mess with our boats or our vehicles. We really don't like that." The way he said that made me not inquire any further. Another instance surprised me as one of our warrens caught fire. It was nearly engulfed in flame when the human found out that a few of the young were actually still inside. Without hesitation, every human male that heard this ran into the flames while the females attempted to comfort the family who were crying for their lost ones. We watched as they ran straight into the mouth of hell as though it was one of their playgrounds. As the structure actually began to collapse, we thought for sure that they had all burned up. To our absolute shock and surprise, they came running out, crashing through the walls if need be, holding the children. Many of the humans are partially ablaze as they run straight to the medical staff, waiting and even refusing to be treated for their injuries until the children are already finished and on their way. This act of sheer insanity and sheer bravery made me actually inquire to another human I knew called Evan over another drink. When I asked him why they didn't hesitate and ran in, he said, "We protect the innocent." And he said this with such conviction that I actually lowered my ears slightly and retreated a few steps. This was emphasized again when a young couple were found to be abusive to the young in the neighborhood. When the truth came out, our culture would simply ostracize them, shun them, and force them to live in shame. The humans had a much more direct approach. When the couple was found 4 days later, They had their right hand and foot completely amputated and seared shut so they didn't bleed out. Their tongues were completely removed, and over a dozen broken bones each, a multitude of contusions and lacerations all over their bodies and faces. Yet the part that made us all vomit was the removal of the male reproductive parts, while the female parts had been burned shut. Even if the doctors could open it back up, the nerve damage was beyond extension. Neither actually wanted to live after that, as they begged for others to end them. But they were actually repaired by the doctors, is our culture. We found out shortly after why the left hand was left intact. When the bodies were found, as is our custom, the suicides are not given any honors. Instead, they are dropped in a hole and left unmarked. Whenever the humans were asked about this, they always gave the same answer: don't worry about it. We never continued to ask. One other small item with humans has to do with their food, actually. Even though some human females actually believe it's funny to steal food from others' plates, this is a massive don't do it. Repercussions from the humans range from immediate expulsion from the setting to getting a fork actually shoved into the hand as they retreat with their so-called prize from the former plate. When visiting a human, never assume you can just eat food without being offered. You can quickly actually lose friends this way, and I now know this. If a human offers, then you are free to take or decline. They won't take offense. However, if the human raised or grew their food, they are very protective of it. We saw the pain this can cause when the human named Bill moved in across the road from my family. Like most of the other humans, he was fairly easy to get along with, mainly because he had come to our part of the galaxy to retire and perhaps find a female to live with. Many humans only did this for a short time, usually, until the reality of being unable to procreate with a Lapin is impossible. Trust me, the doctors have tried to figure it out. Most either stick to themselves afterwards or simply leave. Bill himself didn't seem to be falling into this category that I could see, and he was a rather nice human, always ready to help. In his free time, he taught the local children how to deal with humans and showed them how to prep their bodies for adulthood. This was actually a human concept that we now embrace once we realize the results, of course. Bill's property was not very large, and from the road you couldn't see much except the front lawn, which was very small, and the domicile itself. But on the other side of the domicile from the road, he created a massive garden. He said that he had a green thumb, which scared me at first, as this is a sign of decoy disease. After I found out that this is a euphemism, I took notes on how he created such a wonderful garden. It seems as though he grew far more than he could eat, which is probably why the neighborhood family caused him trouble. I heard Bill cursing one day, and I hurried over to see what was wrong. I thought he might have been injured until I saw him walking around the garden simply cursing and kicking at the ground. I found out that someone had actually come in at night and taken many of his ripe vegetables. I tried to calm him down, of course, noting how that at least 30% still remained, but that seemed to increase his agitation. By the next day, Bill was setting up lights to shine into the garden to catch the thieves. Unfortunately for him, by the time the light woke him up and he arose from his bed and looked out, of course, all he could see is the tail of the thieves disappearing as they jumped over the fence. Believing he had scared the thieves off, he decided he was going to relax a little bit, only to find a piece of cloth over the lights a few nights later, and of course, more items stolen. He asked me how long it would take to import a dog. although that is when I had to remind him of the law strictly forbidding, carnivorous hunting animals on this planet. Bill understood, but he was still upset and said, "Fine, I'll handle those little bastards myself." When I inquired if he was going to kill them, he actually didn't answer, and that made me nervous. A little less than a week later, the entire neighborhood was awoken by the sirens of our law enforcement as they rushed over to this neighborhood. When they stopped across the street, I wanted to know what was going on. I immediately told my mate to hold on to the kids and make sure they did not follow me as I went over. On the way across, I could hear a female screaming, one of ours screeching, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of a human ballistic weapon that they call a shotgun as it discharged. Sprinting to the back, I saw something out of a drama-based program. There was Bill, holding a shotgun towards two adolescents when they were on the ground in pain. Not because he had shot them, no, but because their legs were being held by some sort of metal. As it turns out, Bill had ordered some varmint snap traps from Earth. Though very lethal to very small critters that get their heads caught in these snap traps, it is not that way for larger prey. For them, it is just very effective in immobilizing others through pressure and severe pain. The children's mother had arrived with another one of her kids as the law enforcement was arriving. The female Lapin had been screeching at Bill for having her children locked the way they were. When the law enforcement arrived, he was told that taking vegetables is hardly a crime in our society, which is true. The young ones were in too much pain to say anything as the female screamed about how they had baited her kids, then said, "It's just a couple of vegetables," then claimed that he had to let the kids go as they were free to pilfer his garden whenever they choose. This pissed him off even more. Something I saw in his eyes. Something I worried about as Bill reminded the law enforcement that they were still trespassing on his property. When the law enforcement said it was a low crime and the youth would be released by morning, Bill lost it. He then said, "Then there's only one way they're going to learn." That's when he turned and fired a shot. The female screamed as she thought she'd just watched the execution of her children. Instead, he fired directly between them, scaring them so much that both of the youths lost control of their bodily functions, and mostly passed out, one catatonic and the other one completely unconscious, at least for a few seconds. When law enforcement drew their weapons, Bill just cocked his weapon and stood silent. As they screamed at him, he stood silent and still. After a few seconds, he lowered the weapon and walked over to the two, still crying now that they were awake and covered in their own urine and feces. With law enforcement watching, he put the weapon across his back, held by some strange little strap. Walking over to the two youths, still in shock by what just happened, he reached down and pulled the spikes holding the traps in place, one with each of his large human hands, a feat that would take an adult Lapin every single part of their body just to pull one out. He then dropped the spikes, reached up and grabbed the kids, one in each hand, grabbed them by the waist, lifted them up, and carried them both very unceremoniously to the gate of his property. Then he tossed them both off the property, saying, "If any of you bastards come back to my property again, I'll kill you." He then turned to the law enforcement, "Take these two bastards out of here," and then simply turned back on his property after locking the gate. The two actually had to be taken to the medical facility with the traps still attached and visibly soiled their clothing. This was beyond embarrassing in our culture, especially having to walk to the transport in full view of the entire neighborhood as your own shorts dripped your own fluids. From what I heard, it took a total of 4 lapis to get the traps off each of the Utes. Bill found this hilarious, as he could easily do one by himself. After all this, we found out why he created such a large garden like so many humans do. Scheduled on one of the rest days for us, the entire town was actually invited to the human event that they called a barbecue. I still don't understand the name. Is that an abbreviation or a word? All the humans around town had brought piles of food, exquisitely prepared by all the humans hosting. They had games for all the children of different skill levels, and even brought items to cook their own food on. They even brought extra places for us to sit and eat on. As the human music played in the background, I noticed that the only family that was not present was the ones that had snuck on Bill's property. Walking over to talk to Bill, I remarked on how I now understand why he was so protective. He responded with, "This is what good men do. We protect, and we share our bounty. Besides, I've got enough left for myself to last the rest of the year, so come on, eat up." And like the rest of my kind, we sure did. As I enjoyed this strange vegetable they called a cantaloupe, I turned to watch my children play the human game they called tag. While watching, I inquired on the type of food Bill and Jake and the other humans were eating. He told me that it was fried chicken, where Jake was eating a chicken fried steak. As they ate, one of the newer humans named Balthazar said, "You know what I miss? Hossenpfeffer." Suddenly, the humans got extremely serious. I could see it in their eyes as they looked at him. Two of them reached out and struck Balthazar with their hands open, saying, "Dude!" Another human lightened the mood by saying, "Get a Lupin girlfriend. You can get a taste of home whenever you want if you do that." The humans then turned to look at the one who had said that, and then burst out laughing in that strange sound they make. All I could think was, humans have a strange culture. I see them steeped in respect and they're extremely protective, yet they seem to actually care a whole lot more than they let on. At least the males do. The females seem to be care too much and then actually show that they don't. It's very strange. Though I know they care and they are definitely my friends, there are certain rules to remember, things never to do around a human or to them. Never try and steal their mate, ever, unless you feel like getting beaten down really hard. Never, ever mess with their boats or their vehicles. They really don't like it. Taking something without permission is definitely going to get you hurt. As long as you remember this, humans will always look out for us. Though I would not find out the heights they would go for those they bond with until later. Rangar finished up his long-winded story and took a sip of a human drink they called tea. He looked into the faces of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren as they seemed to be totally fixated on every word he had just spoken. One of the early pubescent boys asked, "Are you talking about the Fox invasion, grandfather?" Ragnar smiled a bit before saying, "Yes. Now I will tell you about how it is important to never push a human beyond reason." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your viewership. Before I go, I need to send a giant thank you to one of my supporters, to the Sir. Yep, that's what he goes by. So, thank you, Sir. Everybody else, I will see you on the next story. This is Syntax, ejecting. Sitting with his children and grandchildren, and even great grandchildren, it was time for the old man to continue from the day prior. One of the little ones spoke up, asking, "Grandfather Alfred, could you please continue with what you mentioned yesterday?" Alfred looked confused as he hoped that their young minds had actually forgotten. He said, "And what might that be, little one?" Without even skipping a beat, the little boy said, "The Vox War. You told us that you would tell us how the humans act when they are pushed too far?" Alfred seemed to grin just a little, realizing that such a young mind repeating his own words back to him showed a great degree of intelligence. With this, he began to think about what the future might hold for this young one. Because of this, he was stuck in his mind for a moment, but came out when Alfred was actually touched on the arm by another one of his grandchildren, a teenager this time. Alfred's mind cleared and said, "Where was I? Ah, yes, the war." It was a perfectly clear day when I was readying myself for employment. It would be a long day, but at least the weather was beautiful. As I passed by one of the humans returning from his morning cardio exercise, which I still don't understand why they do, I shared some pleasantries, of course. When I mentioned that it was such good weather, he responded, "I just hope it stays this nice." It was an odd retort, even for a human. When I asked him to clarify, he mentioned that he used to work for a human government. I do remember seeing his uniform once. It allowed him to blend into the foliage almost perfectly. And in his own line of work, they had a phrase, "Really bad things happen on nice days, so keep your guard up if you can." I had come to listen closely to human phrases like this. Many are what they call proverbs and can actually teach you much when put to good use. I kept my guard up, of course, and was actually able to avoid a collision on my way to my employment. Though it did make me a little paranoid that day. I made sure to watch for myself and actually had a very good day. It is until we were getting ready to go, we composed ourselves to go back to our warrens, and that's when alerts blared out across all channels. Emergency broadcasts ranged through every single device that we had, even those that were up on the wall. Looking, it was clear that a fleet had suddenly arrived. The Vox have never been our friends or allies, or anyone's friends or allies for that matter. It is noted that the Vox only saw strength. Their own religious doctrine dictates that all not of true birth, i.e., Vox, shall be placed in chains to serve. Those that deny then deserve nothing but death. The Vox themselves are very large, standing nearly 3.5 meters tall, a deep green on their skins, but not truly reptilian. They do grow hair and actually lots of it, but in patches scattered all around the body. It's strange, there's no symmetry. Their muscular physique, though, could pick up my own transport with only one hand. With two hands, they could actually pick it up and throw it. The Vox actually do have 6 limbs, and all 6 can actually swap back to either being used as hands or used at feet, depending on how they want to use it. If using them just for speed, they can reach speeds that are, well, incredible, considering their size. Looking at their fleet, we had no chance against them. We're just not set to fight off armadas of massive size. Listening to the transmissions, it was clear that our own governments were actually trying to stall the Vox. This is when the humans suddenly cut in and made communications with the Vox, claiming our world was under human protection. They moved the few ships the humans had between the Vox fleet and our own fleets. I didn't understand why they would risk everything to protect our home planet. That is when the Vox demanded tribute from the humans. When the humans refused, the Vox demanded the ships as compensation for slowing down the invasion. Again, the humans out and out refused. The fight in space began at that moment, and the human civilian ships are far more nimble than we had originally given them credit. They would dodge, dip, dive, duck, and dodge, all the non-guided munitions and their point defenses, once raised out of their hidden compartments, would take care of all the rest. I was able to get inside the Warren while my mate watched the battle on her view screen. It was at that moment that one of the human ships seemed to glow a bit. I didn't understand, and then I saw as it sent out a stream of energy into one of the Vox ships, completely destroying it as though the entire internal compartment just caught on fire. Seeing a civilian ship do this would make any leader rethink their strategy, but not the Vox. They suddenly seemed desperate to disable and capture the human ships. Even the human ship that had suddenly entered the sector on a simple trade run was assaulted by the Vox before they even knew what was going on. At this point, a few of the humans had actually launched to the surface in pods of all things, abandoning their ships, at least it seemed that way. What we did not know at that time is how far the humans would go if you messed with their boats. Many of them would simply explode suddenly into balls of light, scorching the closest Vox ships. One suddenly turned on its FTL engines even though its crew had already left, and turned itself into an FTL missile, and it proceeded straight into the nearest Vox battleship. The results after all the human ships were destroyed was 1 Vox battleship destroyed, 3 Vox destroyers destroyed, 2 frigates completely obliterated, and 9 corvettes either completely destroyed or adrift. Barely scratching the surface of the Vox numbers, unfortunately, but we had hope that the Vox would actually reconsider after such losses to so few ships. There wasn't even a half a dozen human ships in orbit, so would they reconsider? They did not. The Vox invasion rammed its way to the surface. Our defenses were actually effective, but we just did not have enough of them. When the large Vox shuttles reached the ground, those behemoths inside scurried out as though the transport was actually on fire, rushing across the landscape in a flood of flailing limbs and bulbous nature. They landed all over the planet and actually began to pilfer and destroy everything. Those on the ground simply attempted to run away. As fast as the Vox are, they cannot change actually directions all that well. And this is what helped many get away from the initial touchdown. But those that were caught were placed immediately in chains, and we knew they were going to be auctioned off as slaves. Those captured and found unfit to be slaves were either killed instantly or used to fulfill the Vox's belly. Those large jowls they have are able to open wide enough to eat a fully grown weapon. Yet they preferred to bite the victim in half and savor it as the blood dripped down its jowls. When the females they found attractive enough, or the males they found attractive enough, or the young they found attractive enough, the Vox would assault them in front of everyone before either throwing them to another Vox to do the same, or simply crushing the victim underfoot. My mate and I were in a desperate mode to try and leave the neighborhood at this point. Perhaps we could hide in the forest, we thought, like our ancestors did. As we hurriedly packed, I could see Bill slowly walk out of his warren as though he didn't have a care in the world. He was wearing that strange outfit or uniform, whatever it might be, with so many items attached to him. A lot of pouches that seemed random until I looked close. They were actually strategically placed and were completely full. As he walked through his front yard, he ignited something in his mouth. I didn't understand what it was, though I will admit that the sweet aroma drew me just a little closer. As he exhaled the smoke from his mouth, he pulled something off his back. "This is for you, sir," he said, handing me a human ballistic weapon. I was not exactly recognizing this one, but then suddenly I realized his speech pattern had completely changed. It was dark and serious, like when he dealt with those thieves when he was about to blow their heads off. When he handed me the weapon over, he showed me how to use it really quick. Should be good enough to kill one of those six-limbed fucktards. Just to make sure you aim center mass. He said this while pointing at his chest. Now don't aim anywhere else unless you have no choice and it's not exposed. I thanked him for the weapon and the advice, of course, before he handed me some strange satchel he called a bandolier. Inside was several magazines full of ammo, and it was heavy. I wanted to leave at that moment and actually offered to take Bill with us. Then a Vox broke right through a warren that was right down the road. We could see it. Bill turned and said, "Shit. Sir, you get your family to safety. I'll slow this bastard down." I immediately ran towards my transport as Bill ran straight to his place. As I got the children secured, I looked and saw Bill. He was dead still as he had come back out of his house. Turning to look at the Vox, I could see that it was consuming a man while actually assaulting the female I'm assuming was his mate. In one of his free hands, there was the two small children, one in each. A young boy actually started striking at the Vox's hand with some sort of object, but I couldn't make out what. The Vox, feeling this, looked down and then simply crushed the boy in his hand, popped him like a balloon. The older sister screamed in horror, and the Vox lifted her up to his face and licked her with a tongue that was still covered in her father's blood. Before I could even do anything, Bill began to fire with that ancient human weapon. The belt of ammunition trailed into the pack that was now on his back. The heavy machine gun bullets ripped into the Vox, making it screech in pain. As it dropped the two female weapons it was holding, Bill simply yelled, "Over here, you son of a bitch!" The sound of each burst was deafening as he fired those 6 to 9 rounds each time. Each one he fired off his shoulder, making sure that the rounds would actually hit. It was clear that the recoil was actually forcing him back a little bit each time as he couldn't actually keep walking forward. But he just kept going. He might just slow down a bit, but he would just keep going, firing a burst and then waiting a few seconds to fire again. With each burst, he said the same phrase. As sheer hate echoed across his eyes, he said that same phrase with every squeeze of the trigger. "Die, motherfucker, die! Die, motherfucker, die!" And that was with each burst. It was rhythmic. So rhythmic that I thought he was using the phrase to actually time his shots. Seeing this, I was so stunned. I was in a trance. That was until Jake grabbed me by the shoulder. "Sir, you've got to get out of here. Take your family and go, sir." Snapping my mind back into reality, I ran to my transport and began to leave. I pulled up next to Bill and Jake as they stood next to each other. In my rear view, I could actually see Balthazar running towards us in a different but similar attire as Bill and Jake's. I yelled to Bill and Jake to hurry up and run. Jake said, "We're not running, sir." I asked, "What are you going to do?" Bill turned and looked at me with those eyes of unmatched determination. "We're going to kill them all, sir." Before I had a chance to process anything else, my mate started screaming at me to just leave. As we turned the corner, another Vox actually arrived, and it was kind of shocked to see us kind of like go in front of it like we did. This one looked at us for a moment before being perforated by 3 different high-caliber weapons. We knew where these shots were coming from. It was that time that we left for the deep forest as fast as my transport could go. From there, we would listen during the day and night to the echoes of the human ballistic fire mixed in with our own military fighting back. We hid in fear and only came across one Vox while we were out in the woods. Bill was right. I was shaking far too much seeing this thing to actually aim straight, so I missed its 2 hearts. However, the heavy bullets did pierce its lungs, taking the Vox down permanently. Though after dealing with it, I suddenly remembered Bill's words to hold it tight into my shoulder or it's going to hurt. Trust me, it hurt. It was difficult to survive the 3 weeks out there in the woods. Looking back, I should have actually taken up Jake's offer to go camping, as he said. But we pulled through regardless. I remember the slightly dreary morning as I saw a bunch of Vox shuttles just all of a sudden leaving in unison. It was like they were all trying to go. It was that old phrase about the last person around has to pay for the check. This was odd to see them all leave, though, but it was welcome. And as I turned in each direction to see each of these shuttles leaves, I realized that we had actually survived the invasion and smiled as all the shuttles went into the cloud cover. Then something odd happened. A bunch of colorful flashes lit up the morning sky. I could hear rumbling as the lights flashed in the clouds, and then the shuttles returned, all of them tumbling through the atmosphere as they burned, leaving smoke trails behind them. Then I saw what looked like strange rain coming down, and then human ships coming right behind it. The humans had come, and they looked pissed. By the time we returned home, the humans had secured the planet, though our warren was damaged. Thankfully, though, it was still intact. Others were not exactly lucky. As I went into my office, I worried about how we would actually survive after this. Our infrastructure has gone to hell. We got no food left in the house. What are we going to do? The humans are limited in number, too, in comparison to the Vox. Though right now, how would I feed my child and my pregnant mate? This is what I worried about, and I suddenly realized I was thinking more human. It was about that time that I noticed a message on my datapad. It was a simple written note which had my name written on it in human. I knew what it was. They showed it to me. The note itself was from Bill, and it said, "In times of survival, it is human custom to open up your home and share your resources. So, go to my basement and walk to the south wall. You will see a numerical pad. Punch in the code of your child's birthday, day and month, and take what you need." I was confused, but I did what the message told me. And after putting the code in, a hidden door seemed to slide open. It looked like something out of one of those old Earth movies with tons of supplies, weapons, gear, and everything we would need to survive. Along with this, his garden was actually still intact, though it hadn't been tended to in 3 weeks. That is when it hit me. Bill left this knowing he would not survive the invasion. I never saw him or Jake or Balthazar ever again. They had killed hundreds of Vox in a distraction to keep us safe. That's the only explanation I could think of, at least until another group of humans arrived to check on us. The humans were actually surprised how healthy we were, and I explained our situation. They were very somber as they looked onto their datapad. I could actually see from the other side, being that's transparent. I could see Bill's face and some sort of insignia right next to him. It was a strange mountain-shaped lines seemingly stacked on each other, and below it a bunch of curved lines under it. There was something they were not saying, nor did I really want to know at that point. Instead of asking any uncomfortable questions, as the situation was already pretty messed up, I offered them the meat from Bill's storage. At first they declined, thinking we would need this sustenance. However, we reminded them that we are strict vegetarians. They are not. They originally thought there wasn't going to be much there until they saw how much Bill had actually stockpiled. And needless to say, this lightened the mood for the humans a lot. As I look at what the Vox did, I understand how and where they stoked the rage of the humans, what made them want to come in guns blazing. First, they demanded tribute and stole the humans' boats, as they like to call them. Second, they attempted to enslave a friendly population. Humans really don't like that. Third, they assaulted the adults. Fourth, they hurt the children. All this was enough to enrage humanity enough that they would actually fight for us and fight by our side. However, the war, for us at least, was over. Yet the Vox had pissed off the humans. That was bad enough. But their next mistake they did, oh, that could doom a species. It had been 2 months since the Vox were defeated at the Loppen homeworld. 2 months since humanity got angry enough to go to war with the Vox. 2 months since the video surfaced of humans screaming into the camera for assistance, fighting against bulbous behemoths, hell-bent on taking the planets and its inhabitants. 2 months after the live video of the Lappin child being 2 months since the humans stopped waiting on the sidelines and showed their contempt for those that mess with their boats, their friends, their homes, and worst of all, they hurt the innocent. Though only 93% of the humanity's combined governments agreed to the fight, the decision was actually taken out of their hands as the world known as Hussar sent their entire fleet, along with a whole bunch of civilian volunteers, to the Lappin homeworld. The Vox were not expecting a confrontation from anyone else except the Lappin themselves. The Vox immediately declared that all human ships surrender to them, and as they put it, surrender to the superior species. The Hussar fleet showed absolutely no chill. Though outnumbered 40 to 1, the first shots had come from the humans. The massive coil guns, las guns, and the torpedo and missile swarm, along with all sorts of electronic warfare, proved devastatingly effective as it crashed into the Vox formation. There was also the first shot advantage, something that should never, ever be discounted. As the Vox realized the human fleet was not an invasion fleet, but an assault fleet, their leadership realized that they were actually outmaneuvered and outgunned at this point, being that they are actually pushed up against the planet. While recalling all the forces off the planet, the Vox received a message from the humans. The message was to return all the Lappin slaves immediately. In an act of defiance, the Vox did release the slaves, but into the vacuum of space, where the bodies thrashed around for minutes as their lungs slowly imploded, while one side of the body burned from no protection of the sun being hit directly with solar radiation, and the other side began to freeze solid, locking tight as they would actually snap and pop from the sudden freeze. Seeing this, the rage of humanity could no longer be contained. The Hussar fleet dove at the planet, boxing in the Vox fleet as they continued to run their weapons completely hot, glowing even as they continued to fire well past the time they should have stopped. Even the civilian ships drove at the flanks as they sped right into the mouth of hell. Weapons spun in every direction as the human fleet moved all the way to point blank range. Noticing the shuttles trying to breach the planet, every human corvette class turned towards the planet and immediately sent their thrusters on full, followed behind them by frigates that did not have a lot of anti-ship weapons, but they did carry something particularly nasty. The corvettes laid waste to the shuttles as they reached the stratosphere. With precision, they sent all the shuttles down to the surface in flames. As they did, the drop frigates turned and unloaded their troopers with the call, "Bring the rain!" Every corvette and shuttle followed them down to the surface to provide support. Any of the troopers that had any hesitation at all about slaughtering the Vox were immediately put to rest. The unfiltered slaughter of the men, women, and children was enough to have the order sent through all the comms, kill them all. The Vox realized they could fight back, and did, if only out of desperation, though. A few decided, screw this, and ran for it. The Hussar fleet was actually far too preoccupied to chase down a few stragglers as they tried to take out the majority of the fleet still in front of them. In the end, 7% of the Vox fleet actually escaped. The rest, as it stands now, will slowly degrade in orbit until the twisted hulks of their ships are finally pulled down by the gravity well and fall back to the Lappan homeworld. The video is shown of this assault to the Council of Sentient Species, a meeting of spacefaring species in the galaxy. The Vox used this video to show how the humans had forced themselves into a war that was not theirs. The bulbous body of the Vox representative moved quickly around the chamber as she emphasized the point. She started screeching about humans did not obey the superior species that she is, and how the humans must pay in reparations and tribute. The Vox, though strong, was not foolish enough to fight multiple species, which is why they were there to plead their case. They knew that the humans had played nice to every species in the council, highlighting the fact that if the humans found a species appealing, they would locate to said species' planet and begin to mate with said species, claiming that, in essence, the Vox were performing the same act, simply faster. The human representatives sat silently as the Vox continued to rant for over an hour. Though silent, the hatred in their eyes was not hidden at all. Even the Slag, one of the oldest spacefaring species, kind of shriveled away, shyly away from the humans as they sat next to him and could actually feel the vitriol building up and oozing out of the humans. When the Vox finally finished their insane rant, the human representative slowly stood up. He addressed the council by asking, "Is it finally my turn to speak?" The chancellor of the council raised his four-fingered hand and said, "Yes, it is. The council is interested in your decision on this matter." The human representative thanks the counselor before saying, "As we followed the rules of this council, we expect all the members to do the same." After this, he turned sharply towards the Vox and looked them in the eye before saying, "Which means, as I talk, sit down and shut up, you giant fucking mouth asshole." The Vox rep tried to say something, but the other Vox immediately stopped her. The human rep stood tall before addressing the council. "We, humanity and humans in general, we are the patchwork species, that is, one of the younger spacefaring species, understand that the Vox do not understand our actions. We have spread, or attempted to spread out, in an attempt to understand the cultures of other species. To this day, only two species have refused us this opportunity, the Fox and the Schlitz." With that, he motions towards a reptilian species that can adjust their outer biology. As shapeshifters, they do not trust even their own personnel, let alone other species, which is the reason why they don't allow humans, or anyone else for that matter, inside their space. With this, he continues, "After understanding the Schlitz culture, we limit our contact with them to simple trade. This has allowed a peace between us. The Vox, however, have rejected all of our attempts to understand them. In turn, they do not understand us. You see, our history is ripe with atrocities. Atrocities we have survived and learned from. As we reached into space, our patchwork of governments agreed that certain actions, unless by pure accident, will not be tolerated. He had to take a breath to calm himself before continuing, as his hands were beginning to shake. First off, your insistence on tribute is nothing more than extortion. You can call it any name you desire, but that is what it is, extortion. To us humans, attacking our ships and demanding payment was put to rest centuries prior to achieving spaceflight. Entire navies have been created to destroy such practice and practitioners. In addition, we have specific rules of conflict that even the Schlitz agree with. Non-combatants, like children, the sick, the wounded, medical staff, and so on, are not to be directly engaged, nor are they to be used as shields. Not only is using living personnel as shields a true cowardly act, or as our soldiers put it, shows that you got no balls, we will still engage you through said shield, meaning that the shield is meaningless, and the loss of life at that point is even more so. We have footage of the Vox targeting medical facilities directly with their ships, slaughtering the sick, killing the staff, and when 3 humans showed up to stop them, your pathetic elite warriors held the bodies of women and children in front of them as shields. So much for your claim of no fear of other species. It was noted in your rambling as well that those 3 went on a rampage after that, killing all the Vox they encountered. And that included your elite warriors who actually ran away like little bitches. And when the long guns of those humans stopped functioning, they fought your people with knives, 45s, and broken bottles too. Why did they do this? Because all 3 of them were soldiers. From the culture of our soldiers, if you want to die quick, then you target Doc. However, that was not what sent the human fleet to the Lapan homeworld. At this point, he turns and motions, and one of the other humans plays a recording, a compilation of all the atrocities on the innocent women and children, a video that would make all reasonable personnel vomit before wanting nothing more than to kill those who did such atrocities. The representative continued with, "To us humans, there is little that is more precious than the innocent. Innocent civilians, innocent children, and the innocent that you tore into pieces, the innocent that you hunted down, the innocent that you forcefully violated, the innocent that you destroyed and reveled in it." As though on cue, the video of a young boy fighting back against the Vox that was holding him in his hand, striking at the Vox with a simple toy in his hand. The Vox simply looked at him and crushed him, exploding in a complete mess as though somebody had simply just popped a water balloon. Many of the council could not watch and turn their head, but the Vox did so with delight. It was clear that they derived pleasure from such things. It was impossible to hide as the female representative rubbed herself in her seat as she was getting antsy, and the reaction from the males was small but obvious. Still holding himself together, the human representative was beginning to shake in anger. Taking a breath, he calmed himself slightly before continuing. "It is beyond clear that your culture refused to see these acts as abhorrent. Even the insectoid Watcha find this to be wrong." He said this as motioning up to a slightly bulbous insect queen, although could be considered a princess with their culture, that had just vomited into a receptacle before returning herself back into sitting position. Considering they poison their food, liquefy the intestines, and then drink the contents, this reaction was almost unexpected, but welcome to hammer the point home. He continued with, "During your rant, You mention your intention to go to war with all of humanity if we refused your demands. I am here to tell you that we refuse your extortive demands. You will not have our resources. You will not have our boats. You will not have our planets. You will not have any of our territory. You will receive nothing from us. He again had to calm himself down for a moment, and also letting the Vox stir in anger at this act of defiance from a much younger race. He then continued, "We are here as a courtesy. Our customs dictate that we attempt to cease hostilities before they escalate, seeing that as an option that is no longer attainable. We have brought this." A set of document is sent over to the Vox via their own datapads. "These are rules for conducting a war, rules that will limit the destruction, rules that will stop both sides from reaching total war." He then turned back towards the Chancellor and thanked the Chancellor for the ability to speak, and then calmly sat down. Before doing anything, the Vox looked over the documents, hastily but still looking over them, and began laughing in a strange, whimpering huff, which was a cross of hyperventilating and the sound of somebody letting loose a light fart. The Vox representative then stood up. "This must be what your humans think of as humor. We will have war. We will conduct it as we see fit. When it's over, your cities will be burned to the ground. Your territories and your planets, along with your resources, will be ours. Your weak and warriors will be slaughtered, and your desirables will be our slaves, our toys. In fact, I will assure that you and your spawn are toys for me to abuse. I will keep you alive to watch your pathetic fleet torn asunder, and we will hunt down each and every one of your species." The Vox representative actually was getting taller and taller as she spoke, so much so that she seemed to actually bend over towards the humans a little bit before she continued. "We already know you cannot stand against us. You bled your fleets dry to destroy a simple invasion group. All of your ships are damaged or destroyed and cannot withstand our might. With simple numbers, we will cover your territory like a flood in which there is no escape. This is what we will do to you, and we will enjoy every moment of it." The human representatives all stand in unison, all three of them, and simply stated, "Then let there be war. Before we begin, are you sure you do not want to sign that document first?" The Vox picked up the datapad, looked at it for just a moment, and then tossed the datapad on the ground right below her, then raising up one of her hands/feet and crushing it. Then she moved up as high as she could, raised herself though that she looked very intimidating as she loomed over the humans. She began to get close, clearly trying to get within striking range. The human representative simply said, "Damn shame." The representative said this right before all three of them reached underneath their garments and drew pistols and then emptied entire magazines into the three Vox in front of them, all of them seeming to already know which target they were going to take down. Once they were done, with practiced precision, the humans reloaded their weapons as the Vox lay on the ground. Only one was still alive, as the main representative of the Vox sat there trying to breathe. While reloading, the human representative walked up to the wheezing Vox as 2 of her 4 lungs had been punctured. He looked down at her, and she looked up at him in fear and sheer hate. He simply said, "You should have signed it," then put 4 more bullets right through her skull. The chamber was totally stunned at this. No one was daring to move as security opened the doors and rushed in. The humans simply holstered their weapons and started reaching into their own booth and grabbing their cases. As the security held up their weapons, the humans just continued doing what they're doing. One of the representatives pulled out a communication device out of his case and simply said, "Sir, did you get all that?" The voice responded, "Roger. Operation Cry Havoc is a go." As they walked to the door, one of the humans actually turned to the security, tossed him a credit chip that was actually quite valuable, and stated, "Sorry about the mess," before just continuing to walk away. Before the humans even reached their shuttle pad, the representative of the Lapin ran up to them and asked if they could actually meet again. If they, what will the humans do? Will they be able to protect the Lapin home planet? One of the representatives placed his hand on the Lapin's shoulder and then said, "Those winged hussars will watch over you, but until this war is over, you'll probably never see us again." That, in fact, would be the last time most species ever saw a human. Yet, they would come to find out what a human means when they say total war. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you so much for enjoying today's story. Before I go, I'd like to send out a couple of quick thank yous to a couple of my supporters. They would be Erica Gem and SS Demon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Everyone else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out. The war with the Vox began, as it always does, with hit-and-run tactics aimed at dragging down supply lines. The ability for humans to seemingly appear out of nowhere, take out a target, and then disappear into the void surprised the Vox. This show of aggression made the Vox believe that their estimates about humans' ability to fight were actually true. Believing that if the humans could only strike small, soft targets, then there must be true that the humans use their entire might to take a single planet. This is nothing to the Vox, as their territory reaches over 600 systems, while the humans only have 54 by best estimate. Many of these human systems are believed to have only a single colony world on them that was even worth anything. This war should be over quickly, and the Vox will believe the new territory and the new toys to play with, well, it will be worth whatever they lost. Mobilizing 98% of their entire combined fleet, the Vox prepares to attack. In a blitzkrieg not ever seen before, the Vox spread out and strike against every human planet and system near their border at the same time. They even crossed into Slag and Watcha territories to and almost eliciting a response from those species before simply moving across, not even coming out of FTL. The only systems they avoided were the Lapin, where the Vox leadership believed a full garrison of humans and up-armored Lapin reside. It would be embarrassing if the only planet they were not able to take was actually the Lapin homeworld that started this whole thing off. Across all sectors, the Vox attacked, and what they found was not what they were expecting. Every single human world has its own defense fleet, along with satellites, minefields, electronic warfare that scrambled every sense that they had, and the list of dangers just got larger the closer they got to their targeted planet. There were stealth ships, ground-based anti-vessel cannons and missiles, drones that numbered in the millions that turned into a death cloud reaching from low-orbit satellites and the planets themselves. Getting flickering images of this, the Vox believed that it had to be a trick and charged blindly forward, believing that no one could stop them. In each human sector, from the newest colony world all the way to Earth, the Vox drove thousands of ships towards each planet's surface. Even as many ships heard the clang of mines impacting their ships, moments, of course, before detonating and venting most of their atmosphere. Even the millions of drones that formed a circle around the fleets and attacked like a horde of angry mosquitoes in a nudist colony, ripping the smallest ships to pieces with munitions before forcing a landing on these ships and tearing them to pieces with large mechanical arms and torches. If the drones themselves had nothing actually to attach and cut with, they would simply drive towards the enemy ship and go full kamikaze, trying to bury itself deep into the enemy ship before detonating. While this was happening, the Vox Command watched their formations get smaller and smaller from the outside in. However, as long as their main ship was fine, they still demanded the fleet continue forward. The next things the Vox had to deal with were the satellites, many spamming out torpedoes as fast as they could, followed quickly by massive las gun that cut through of even a Vox cruiser, and a huge coil gun that would pierce clean through a Vox capital ship if given the chance. Following all this, if the enemy fleet wanted to continue, which they always seemed to want to, there was the human war fleets. Many of the human ships covered in so many weapons that they looked like a spruce tree that its top was pointed towards the enemy. This was weird, but when the guns started talking, everyone listened and didn't think it was so funny. All of the ships cutting across the blackness of space with their las turrets, punching massive holes in even the largest enemy ships, along with the coil guns piercing clean through one and then into another, spamming out even more torpedoes and more missiles that even the best ship couldn't figure out what the hell was coming in and what to shoot at. The Vox defenses were robust, but this was mainly due to their numbers that were declining fast over time. Yet the Vox still drove forward, firing into the human lines in an attempt to force the humans to submit. Many of them would turn a pastel green as they realized that the humans were targeting their ship. In desperation to save their own ass, many of the Vox claimed that they had slaves on board. These calls sent to the humans were actually left unanswered as more and more of the Vox ship were torn apart. This confused them as they believed the culture of the humans was to protect the innocent, but they didn't realize, or didn't remember, that the humans always said, "Oh, you got a human shield? Oh well." On the youngest of the colony worlds, the Vox were having some success. The limited number of human ships, satellites, and drones, and of course surface infrastructure, made it possible to force their way to the planets, albeit with surprisingly high casualties considering the forces they were facing. Wanting to take the planet as a trophy, they prepared to land. On the way down, all human suborbital aircraft seemed to blitzkrieg the shuttles, sending many of them screaming to the surface while others exploded. Those shuttles that actually made it to the ground were immediately targeted by explosives that seemed to be launched from dozens of kilometers away, many times launching over the top of mountains far out of the line of sight. This forced the Vox that landed to scatter while trying to work their way towards their objective. The Vox on the planet found out, however, what happens when the fighters that they were worried about suddenly left. The shuttles didn't want to stay on the ground, as no one would, as they're catching all sorts of artillery fire. So as soon as they were unloaded, they tried to take off and believed that they would be dogged all the way towards the outer atmosphere. However, what awaited them was a whole bunch of guided munitions using chemical propellants as they rumbled across the sky, each of them smashing into the shuttles, corvettes, and frigates that made planetfall. This caused more of them to crash, sometimes crashing right on top of the invaders that they just dropped off. With forces on the ground still advancing, it was up to the locals to face the flood, which they did. The bulbous, straight-up fat Vox charged with great speed at the human settlements, only to find the humans ready and waiting. The large body of the Vox made it difficult to maneuver inside a town or city, so the locals set up spikes along the roads. The hollow spikes used usually for stopping vehicles turned out to be devastatingly effective, as the Vox actually could not stop the blood spraying out of the hollow tubes that are usually used to remove air from a tire, and now it's making the Vox bleed out way too fast. The Vox quickly discovered that the easiest way was always mined as well. Explosives would rip the bodies open, causing massive organs of the Vox to spill out across the ground, many of them still alive as they saw their intestines, their liver, and whatever else was all the way across the other side of the street. The smell of it was far beyond horrible. Whenever a human was seen, they always seemed to have a weapon. Normally, this was some sort of ballistic cannon of some sort, at least that's what the Vox called it. Smaller calibers would actually bounce off the Vox's hide, which they thought funny. But they also found out that something called a sabot would make life just horrible, as it would force even a larger projectile, something that normally would bounce off their hide, straight through and into the bodies, burying it so deep that even the Vox medics couldn't even get in to get it out, and they would die slow and painful. The worst for the Vox was when they found out that the humans love fire. Things like plasma throwers, igniting accelerants that the Vox actually stood on, combustible liquids thrown in lit bottles, and sometimes they didn't even have to be lit, as they realized this sticky, burning fluid would just not extinguish if it ended up on them as they writhed in pain, rolling on the ground, screeching as they slowly died as they cooked. This was just if it was a colony world. Agro worlds would drive large equipment straight into the Vox line, equipment seemingly designed to chew them up and spit them out, literally. Any Vox caught up in one of these machines would die screaming as the machine dragged their body inside and tore them up into bite-sized little pieces. Even if the Vox were fortunate enough to remove the human out of the machine itself, the machine seemed to have a mind of its own, as it just would continue on its rampage. Though not guided anymore, it would still keep going. Any of the human planets that were built up with a full military would hold the line, as they would use weapons and vehicles designed specifically to kill. From the plasma being thrown to large caliber munitions to high explosives, everything was used. Even things like sonic cannons that would cause the Vox to drop in pain as their ears quite literally exploded, all 6 of them. Keeping the cannon on the Vox, well, the Vox organs would then liquefy within a matter of seconds. The Vox, however, continued their assault as far as they could, as they were tearing buildings open, pulling out the occupants, and treated them the same way they treated the Lapin. Every time this happened and it was successful, and the humans happened to see it, the humans seemed to fall into a rage, and they would attack with absolute blind fury, abandoning their cover and concealment, striking out with whatever they could grab. They would then swarm the Vox, tearing it apart and leaving it to bleed out on the street, missing many of the parts it would need, in particular its limbs, its eyes, its tongue, and pretty much anything else it might have a pair of. Any human planet above the status of an agro world would be able to stop the Vox invasion cold. Industrial worlds held out but were severely damaged. Core worlds were able to stop almost all attempts to even start a ground invasion, as they had the largest navies, of course. This would be a lesson that the Vox politicians would not hear about. Yet those that attacked the core world would find out that humans had definitely not drained their entire navy on a single planet. As the battles ended, everyone scrambled to resecure the borders around their individual planets, and of course they also began to send their fleets out to take back human worlds. Since the Vox had decided to attack all of humanity at once, it was truly time to let slip the dogs of war. Deep in the ether of space, human ships waited. The Vox had no idea that humanity was actually preparing for an assault. Yet they would find out very quickly as the call went out. the one call that would change their perception of humanity, everyone's perception of humanity, forever. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining us on today's chapter. Before I go, I'd like to send a special thank you, a big thank you, to Brian Kemp, a supporter of the channel. Thank you so much, my friend. And everyone else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax. Punching out. As the Vox blitzkrieg across human space was coming to an end, Operation Cry Havoc had finally arrived. Out of the void of space, human ships arrived surprisingly close to Vox core worlds. Their mission was simple: show the core worlds what happens when you piss off humanity. Above each of the Vox worlds, each battle group carried a different payload. The first one to deploy was the battleship Rising Tide. This group made up of large cargo ships with certain payloads. After getting into position, each ship fired its load onto the face of the planet and left before the counterattack could even respond. The jamming pods that they had set up on the ship worked wonderfully to keep the ships off of the enemy sensors. Most payloads dropped looked like large metal balls at a 555-meter diameter. The only thing that didn't look like a large ball was a 3-meter diameter spike that was 37 meters long. The metal balls would crash into the vast oceans of the planet and begin to sink very, very rapidly. Coming in at terminal velocity made them nearly impossible to counter, though the Vox did try. The single metal spike came down so fast that there was no chance of intercepting it at all. In fact, the radar barely picked it up before it hit. The spike struck into the ground, piercing deep into the mantle of the planet. The nearest city actually watched in awe at the spike breaking the sound barrier and then punching a giant hole in the clouds as it screamed towards the objective. If the residents actually realized what that was, they would not look at it with awe. Instead, they would have run in sheer terror. The tungsten rod penetrated deep into the caldera of the planet's only supervolcano, piercing the magma chamber. The heat of the magma began to melt the spike, causing the explosives inside to detonate from the heat and pressure. The explosive wave created through the force to assure that the hole that it came through would simply gush, assuring that it would not close. The chain reaction caused the supervolcano to erupt in a massive fireball of magma, flying debris and burning foliage in all directions. The explosion and resulting eruption caused a shockwave throughout the land that easily tipped 9 plus in the Richter scale. The blast wave of wind and heat levels everything for 60 kilometers in every direction. The force even takes fully grown Vox off all 6 of their feet and tosses them like they're a freaking beach ball. Then, as all the giant pieces of molten and burning debris crash and everything stabilizes, then the ash arrives. It creates a blizzard of powdered concrete across most of the continent, something that no one ever wants to breathe in, and definitely would crush any domicile once it builds up and makes significant weight. As the eruption from the supervolcano makes 1/3 of the planet completely unlivable, the results of the giant splashdown of the orbs is being felt as a 2 to 8 foot wall tsunami begins to hit all coastlines at the same time. It's enough to cause some panic, but not a lot of damage, more of an annoyance. As the waters begin to recede, the true results are then shown. The orbs detonate with a force measured in megatons. The blast wave from the explosion so deep in the ocean pushes up from the seabed and pushing the tectonic plates out of alignment. The secondary quakes simply add to the coming devastation. Devastation in the form of tsunamis measuring over 120 meters at the time of impact with the shore. Most of the tsunami alarms are actually still blaring, warning of the incoming tsunamis, yet anyone that cannot see the ocean believes that the alarm had just not been shut off yet. Anyone going to the shoreline to save themselves from the wrath of the fire of the supervolcano quickly found out that the water can be just as deadly. As the tsunami waves actually reach the caldera, the water mixes with the toxic gases that are being emitted from the volcano. This mixture of poisons all the water on the largest continent of the planet. The groundwater, everything is now toxic. This planet being mostly islands, watches as most of the islands are wiped completely clean off the map as waves strip everything down to the vegetation off the islands, and some that are small personal islands are simply gone. The few survivors on the planet end up looking and realizing they got plenty of food around, as it's still mostly there, though mixed with shitty water and ash, meaning that anything not sealed is contaminated. Which means if you're smart, they should be able to get through the aftermath just fine, as they have an abundance of resources per individual still there. But they would still have to know how to survive in such a situation. The next planet struck would find out what happens to an industrial world when the humans bite back. Again, human ships arrive, but this time with many, many frigates. Still using the jammers to rush towards the core world, they deploy their payload across the face of the planet. After blowing their whole combat load, they break contact and disappear into the void in an attempt to avoid what's coming. Guided torpedoes scatter across the planet, and defense forces rush to shoot them down. They never get the chance as the munitions detonate in the ionosphere, brightening up the sky more than the red dwarf star in that sector. On the dark side of the planet, at least for a few moments, it's just as bright as high noon. Everybody watches for a few seconds, thinking their defense forces had simply performed exceptionally and taken down all the enemy munitions. A few moments later, they found out that the humans had actually doomed them all. The wave of electromagnetic pulse rippled across the planet, each wave crossing each other, intensifying each other as they reached the surface, making all the residents actually tingle to the point of, in some cases, climax. Yet this would be the last pleasure they had, as all their electronics suddenly caught fire. From the outside, you could see light from the fires inside that seemed to be catching every single domicile on fire, yet it's not only light. The power modules for each house, business, and even basic necessities are either sitting there smoldering or are fully burning. Every electronic device or anything that could even accept an electrical current has now turned against its owners, as many of them thrash around violently trying to get their devices away from them. Emergency services, running water, refrigeration, everything that an advanced society has come to rely on for every day was now burning. Yet, in a moment, it would get so much worse. All vehicles fail and drift away. Automated transports crash into each other or into other buildings or even foliage. Repulsor lift devices slam to the ground, destroying the sensitive pieces on the bottom. Almost 20% of them simply explode without their safeties in place. This would send them flying into something or someone. All flying devices, from drones to aircraft, simply come down hard as they're flying dead stick. In multiple cities, large cargo and commuter craft crash into populated areas and buildings. This is only adding to the chaos. Even a cruiser-class warship that had not cleared the atmosphere yet came tumbling down to the ground in a massive explosion that could be seen from space. Those remaining alive now have to face an incredibly short supply, as most had either burned up or would soon be looted. The weeks it would actually take to bring enough supplies will bring much of the population to the point of desperation no one wants to see. desperation to the point of cannibalism. Anyone on the outside could see this, as even the spaceports were inoperable, as many of them had craft on their own runways which now couldn't be moved, means no supplies in and no personnel out. The next world would face something humanity had cooked up just special just for the Vox. Once again, reaching the planet, hoping the jamming pods still work, the group goes full burn across the mesosphere. The shockwave is enough to send many running for cover as they didn't know what was going on. Yet, as before, if they knew what was coming, they would at least try and find a way off their planet. The ships begin emitting chemtrails across populated centers while dropping canisters that parachute softly their way to the surface. As they slowly snake their way across the surface, an audible hiss is actually heard from the canisters. Even on the ground, the moment anything touches the canister, they simply spray out, burst open, if you will, with a vile-smelling sludge. It doesn't burn anything, but it does do something. As the human ships tilt out and go full burn out of the atmosphere, trying to clear the gravity well so they can jump, those on the surface begin to feel hot, and not in a good way. The population was just hit with a multitude of chemicals ranging from chloride to full-blown VX gas. The canisters sprayed bacteria from a simple gut bacteria to super gonorrhea. The Vox immune systems would actually go into overdrive trying to face all of the issues at the same time, not knowing what to strike at. If they were lucky, they would simply go into shock and pass out and not wake up again. If not, they now have a chance of bleeding out of all their orifice as their central nervous system begins to shut down. Others would have some of their organs and or brain melt away inside the body. Others ended up covered in boils or psoriasis or some sort of skin condition, and watch their own skin melt off as it just simply itched so bad that they would sometimes scratch it to the point where it's not there, but it would still itch and scratch into the muscle, into the tendons. The paltry few that survive all these conditions is guaranteed to be 100% sterilized. Those scenarios played out across a dozen other worlds for the Vox. The only one treated with special care was the Vox homeworld. The humans did not play around with them. Jumping into the system, their jamming pods allowed first, second, and third strikes, surprisingly. This advantage, as they pushed towards the capital city, the humans sent the message, "You should have signed it." Before bombarding the capital city, its 4 sister cities with battleship cannons and turrets, and a few nukes just for good measure. Once done, the humans turned and left, sending out one more message. "We left the rest of your homeworld alone for good reason. If we have to come back, we will finish the job." With that, the humans disappeared back into the black. The Vox recalled all remaining ships to aid in this crisis, and seeing the damage caused only solidified their desire to trample all of humanity. With over 500 systems left untouched, they still vastly outnumbered the humans. A war of attrition was now the only business from that moment on. Even as the other species begged the Vox to stop, saying things like, "The humans are willing to come to the peace table." "This war will destroy your people." "You have no idea what the humans are willing to do to win. This is nothing." These phrases fell on the Vox deaf ears. The few remaining government heads only wanted to build more ships, better ships, and more assaulters to die for them. Their pride, their vanity, their greed, their wrath at being humiliated like this. This was the Vox culture, after all, and they will not be denied by some upstart species with, beginner's luck? The command from the Vox was simple. Find the humans and kill them wherever you may find them. Humanity found out about this, and one of the admirals who was staring at a star map heard this and was quoted as saying, "This is going to take some time, a lot of time." Then he turned to his command staff and said, "Operation Rimworld is in effect." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you very much for joining me on today's story. Before I go, I'd like to send out a big old thank you to the Sir. Yeah, that's what he goes by, just Sir. So thank you, Sir. And thank everybody else for joining us today. I'll see y'all in the next one. This is Syntax, ejecting. The war between the Vox and the humans didn't take long to spin up. Even with a dozen planets near a complete loss, the Vox simply used it as a rallying cry across their entire territory. For Vox, it is pride and honor for them to destroy anyone that dishonors them. This is a culture of ritual battle, ritual marriages, a sign from birth, a culture of a strict caste-based system in place only to allow the absolute best to be found and to be raised up. Digging into the histories, it is actually clear that raising yourself above your station relied on being the absolute best, along with a good dose of timing, that is. When the humans studied the histories of the Vox, it is clear that the best can be found, but if they are a threat to the status quo of what is perceived of power and authority, or should say who holds the power and authority, they might just have an accident. A few lucky ones would be sent into a location to be set up to fail. If they succeed, regardless of said conditions, then they would be raised up above their caste. If they are still considered a threat to the status quo, though, they would find an accident waiting for them. The human diplomats would have their military representative explain this by saying, "We've seen this before. The funnier someone claims to be, the more cringe-inducing they are. The stronger and more dangerous someone claims to be, the weaker and more pathetic they actually are. And the more honorable a group claims to be, the more dishonorable they truly are." The other species diplomats could not fully emphasize this position. You see, even though their logical brain had understood it, they really couldn't fully grasp the situation because it just wasn't them. Something like this is just not part of their cultures, so it is what it is. What they inquired about is simply, if humanity understands this and has lived through it, why are you so eager to be around a species like everyone else that never embraces these concepts? When asked this, the humans actually showed their teeth as one of them responded with, "To us, your honesty is refreshing. It's like taking a full breath of fresh air after being inside for too long." While much of the universe tried to comprehend it all, humanity began their total war. Very few times did humanity use their species destroying weapons. Instead, they preferred to get close and get personal, as in they would get their hands actually dirty. You would not believe this phrase at the beginning of the battle, but by the end, oh yeah. The humans claim to be a patchwork species, as in no unifying government over the entire species was ever in full display. With each battle, different tactics are used. Though the weapons are similar, their deployment can be radically different. Something that most species believed was a weakness was now actually a strength. One of the more confusing space battles happened when a single dreadnought-sized ship arrived in a Vox sector, flanked by 6 small destroyers and 6 more frigates. A pair of slag merchants witnessed and recorded the entire battle. The humans, at first sent out a communication, which is apparently an attempt to end a battle before it begins. The signal was sent across all spectrums, so even the slag picked it up. An image of a human was in full military uniform, standing there stoically looking into the camera. Over his shoulder was a strange being that the slag found out was a visual version of the ship's artificial intelligence. Noticing this, it just reinforced the concepts that humans will actually bond with things, and not just things that are organic. Before the human could talk, all eyes actually went to the small 3D image of a half-human, half-fox female with bleach white fur. Her piercing blue eyes looked into the souls of all who were watching, making most not even realize that she was wearing a short, ornamental robe. As her ears seemed to flick a little bit, the man spoke. "This is the human fleet war sniper. To all Vox, you will stand down all your forces, or you will be destroyed. You will not have any other warnings." Then the image just disappeared. The slag merchants just watched as the Vox continued to rally their fleet. As they advanced, charging their weapons on the way, something happened to the human ship. The large dreadnought, even though it wasn't slowing down, seemed to open row upon row of doors. Looking close, you could see that they opened on not just the port and starboard sides, no, but also the ventral and dorsal sides, as well as the bow of the ship itself. As it did this, small drones began to launch. Drones that, from what they could see, were barely 3 meters wide by 3 meters tall. But that wasn't the main body. That was the arms that stretched out. It was odd. The slag observing this were actually having trouble calculating the numbers of drones that poured out of the ship as it advanced. They didn't even care about the specifications of the drones, but looking at so many. Looking at the screen, the slag could see the contact of combatants on the battlefield rising. It passed 1,000, then 4,000, 6,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 within a minute, all the way up to its flashing uncalculable across the screen. The death cloud of these drones wrapped around the enemy fleet at distance before turning and attacking from every different direction at once. The Vox did die shooting and screaming, but they died quickly as the drone swarm just crunched in on them from all sides. It wouldn't matter the size of the Vox fleet. There was just too many. The slag watched the drones move away from the now twisted hulks of the Vox ship and sweep around the planet, taking out all defenses the Vox had as the human ship nonchalantly approached it. The slag watched the drone swarm return to the carrier in a quick but surprisingly orderly fashion. They watched as the destroyers fired onto the planet what seems to be a multitude of items sent down to the surface, many of them simply looking like odd teardrops. That's when one of the slag ship turned to actually get a closer look, maybe to scan these items to see what they are. Then, as they did, the human AI suddenly appeared on the screen. She raised her arm and waved her finger, saying, "Bad." Then followed up with, "You should go home now." Realizing the point of what she just said, they immediately did, very, very quickly. As the slag began briefing all the other species about what they saw, another crew burst in. The Watcha crew pushed the guards aside as they held up a datapad, screaming about how, "You need to see this! The humans have gone insane!" The council members told the guards to pause and let the crew approach. Though they did let the crew approach, even though their hands were placed right next to their weapons, just in case the crew was not there for friendly intentions. The captain of the crew hurried to his own representative to input his device. As they rushed, the representative asked him why he was in such a rush. What was going on? Where's the fire? The captain didn't answer, as he was still pale and focused on his work. And then he stopped, hit a button, and it played the recording. On the recording was a human fleet, easily twice the size of the Hussar fleet that liberated the Lapin. In the center of the formation was a quartet of dreadnought-class ships, with battleships actually surrounding them. Along with that was the support of destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and corvettes. The humans actually were facing down one of the shipyards of the Vox, though a smaller shipyard. It still maintained a massive fleet around it, as ships were simply being sent off the moment they were finished. This meant that the humans were currently outnumbered 38-1. As the Vox moved into position, the transmission reached every ship, station, and planet in the sector. This is the human fleet, America. Stand down and surrender. You will have no additional warning. Over the shoulder of this admiral speaking was another ship AI. This time, it took a very human shape. It appeared to be a female warrior with metal armor on its torso and forearms reaching down over its digits, yet the top of its arms were bare. Looking at it, it was clear that the neck-long blonde hair accentuated the deep blue eyes and delicate features, yet no one even cared, as they couldn't miss the very large ballistic weapon it carried, which seemed to have metal teeth slung underneath the barrel. This was weird to everyone else. The admiral left the line open, and the humans seemed to wait until someone said something near him. The human jargon made the admiral look into another direction. In the council chambers, as they watched, they looked on the readout from the Watcha crew, and it's clear that the Vox had no intention of backing down. On another part of the display, it was clear that the Watcha ship that was recording this was actually on full burn, trying to get as far away from the battlefield as possible, and no one could blame them. As they did this, the video shows the human admiral sigh as he then made the call, "Bridge to main gun. Chief Ava, drop one right on their heads." Before the transmission cut out, the admiral looked into the camera, raised his fist up with his digits facing him, and then extended his center digit, and then the video stopped. Everyone turned to the next screen, showing the human elite fire their first shot from that same dreadnought. It was quickly followed by the other three. The massive las cannons only took a few moments before impact with the Vox fleet, each one cutting through the Vox ships in front of it in moments as it cooked its way through, and still continuing on towards the shipyards. The ships that were struck were clearly cut into pieces, but the fate of the shipyards was so much worse. Since they're actually far more fragile than the ships that they build, the shipyards broke apart and started to fly out of control. Unable to hold their orbit anymore, the shipyards began to plummet to the industrial planet below. As the shipyards that were struck began their long journey towards the surface, the main guns continued past. The beam had not fully broken yet, and it was headed right towards the planet. The resulting impact was mitigated a lot by the planet's own defenses from light, radiation, and so on, yet it was still devastating. Looking after the beam finished hitting, there was a perfect burn circle on the surface where everything had just been superheated above 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of 2.3 seconds. Or a large portion of ocean simply exploding due to the sudden evaporation as the beam struck down into it. Seeing the range and devastation of human cannons, the Vox did exactly what you don't want to do. They hesitated. This gave the human fleet another free shot that pierced through the enemy lines, then took out more stations and then struck the planet once again. Seemingly pulling their heads out of their collective asses, the Vox charged and tried to rush the humans. That is, until the readout showed the Vox spinning up their FTL engines. The micro jump later, and they were almost on top of the human fleet. Many speculated that the Vox probably figured that the Dreadnought was defenseless up close, being specialized for long-range fire and only long-range fire. They were wrong. Not wasting any time, the human vessels, to include the Dreadnought, began to spit out fire in every direction. Las guns of all sizes cutting through the hull of enemy ships, ballistic coil guns and turrets taking out the Vox ship with a single strike. Medium ballistic and energy weapons spraying around and spinning madly. Rapid fire point defense guns sending out so much ballistic fire that they could actually be mistaken as energy weapons at that moment. Guided munitions were also launched, so many in fact that it filled the space as it seemed as though thousands, even tens of thousands, filled the space, penetrating deep into a ship before delivering their load with such a strong burst that it would break the back of the ship it just entered, leaving the ship drifting in space as it leaked out components and crew from the hull that was left. The council looked on in horror at the video as the humans cut apart the Vox forces with such malice and precision that a few council members actually had difficulty maintaining control over their bodily functions. Though the human ships all had battle damage by the end of said battle, every human ship was, at least, recoverable. As the larger ships are seen to attach the disabled smaller ships to their hulls in preparation for the jump, others separated from the main group and headed towards the planet. As they advanced, the human battleships destroyed the rest of the shipyards, sending them drifting towards the planet's surface along with their moon. The smaller ships then entered the planet's atmosphere. The ships actually didn't reach the surface, nor were they actually trying. The ships began to use their EMPs to shut down the planet. Again, within moments, massive fires began almost immediately as all the electronics inside this industrial area just burst into flame. They had to work fast, though, as the jamming pods were no longer effective. A multitude of Vox aircraft tried to intercept the frigates and destroyers that were skirting inside their atmosphere, but then soon realized that the EMP would stop not only the aircraft, but their guide and ordnance as well. Only a single Vox fighter was able to fire its main energy beams into a human ship before the EMP burst, a burst that immediately not only shut down the weapons, but the engines, and everybody was thinking, boy, I hope that thing has an ejection pod. It didn't do much more than scratch the paint. However, in that moment, one of the Vox had actually earned the respect of a crew. The Watcha captain then received the transmission from the humans, "Go away," which they did right into the council chambers where they showed the video. The council was in shock at what they had just witnessed. They thanked the Watcha crew and, of course, gave them a little compensation, and was in stunned silence as they pondered the implications of what they just saw. Though they wanted to confront the humans on what the hell was going on, the council wouldn't be able to do so, as the humans had decided that they would not be part of the council until the war is over. They need to be able to conduct things freely. From that point on, the council could not go through a single session without discussing the humans and how the war was progressing, as it seemed as though the humans were winning every engagement. Many thought that the war would actually be over much faster than the humans said, though these thoughts were immediately pushed down as everyone would simply pull up a star map and remind them that the Vox had hundreds of planets that needed to be either conquered or destroyed, and this would simply take time. To one species, though, they had wished that the war would actually end yesterday. The Watcha had a breakout of a disease that turns out to be very slow, very painful, and very, very, very deadly. Seemingly, a species wide pandemic had struck, and all other species had quarantined them. And with no ships in or out of their territory, and no supplies coming in or out, and they're having difficulty keeping their personnel healthy enough to actually travel, it would only be a matter of time before the Watcha would shrink down to single percentages compared to what they were, or they would simply go extinct. In desperation of this event, some tried to leave but were always denied entry into other territories. Those that tried to forcibly land in other territories were forcibly evicted from their meat suits before they could make planetfall. Yelling out to the rest of the galaxy, the Watcha begged for help. Yet for weeks, months even, there was no response except for, "This is your problem," which was the gist of it. After understanding this, the Watcha finally believed that the other species had left them to die. Probably, they figured, just to claim the territory once they're all gone. Realizing this, many begin to prepare themselves for the mass ritual suicide. In the Watcha culture, this is the most honorable way out of this situation. And as they prepared, they cursed the other species for leaving them to rot, to slowly die off so that what? The others can claim territory? Of course, it is free real estate. Many of them now understood the human phrase. The High Cleric began her long sermon as each of the Watcha kneeled down next to the ceremonial blades. As she sent the sermon to each planet, the High Cleric asked for a miracle, something to stop them, something that would keep them going as a species. When she asked this, there was nothing. So she continued her sermon, and all across each of the planets they could all hear her. Yet, for some reason, they heard something else. What they heard was a transmission coming in. What they received was a translated voice breaking through the speakers that simply stated, "Never give up hope. Sometimes it's the only thing that can keep you away from the void of despair." They knew this phrase. It wasn't said exactly right, of course, which confused the living crap out of everyone. And this definitely was not the High Cleric. This was a male voice, not a female voice. What the hell was going on? Everyone was confused as they still held their blades at the ready to finish the ceremony. Then, each of the Watcha planets, the sound of a human fleet announcing themselves, every single one of them saying, "This is Captain whoever it might be. This is Admiral. We're here." Most of them finishing off their own announcement by saying, "Sorry it took so long. Traffic's a bitch." Across the Watcha territory, millions of blades are suddenly dropped to the ground as they look up, and human ships descend onto each world, station, and colony that still had survivors. Those ugly flying bricks that the humans used had never looked more beautiful to anyone ever. Each one adorned with a symbol, a white square with a red symbol on it. From that part on, that symbol would be held in the highest regard by all species as it meant salvation. The humans, once they landed, disembarked their ships in large biohazard suits. Then they immediately began to set up chow and medical tents along with bringing the infected inside to be tested. The youngest of the insectoid Watcha were treated first, which surprised the Watcha, but they didn't complain considering all they were receiving. It was clear to even the least trained eyes that an operation this large has actually put the war with the humans on hold. This could become very detrimental to the humans, but they seemed to not even care about it. They cared about something else, the Watcha. What the humans did actually care about, though, was saving lives. The Watcha didn't understand why they were so dedicated to this because the Watcha have large families. So losing a few of their young before they even reach maturity is not a huge dramatic event. Traumatic, sure, but not something they're going to cry for days about. At least, not in comparison to the humans. The humans, would keep working on one of the infected that had dropped long after the locals would have simply given up. And they would keep going no matter what. Yet, with each loss of life, the humans seemed to take it personal. Many, breaking into tears or screaming in frustration for not being able to keep even a single from their demise. More than 100 times each of the watchers saw a human, many of which were called Doc, would have to be told to actually stop by another human's. Stop and let the watcher go. There was nothing more they could do. The frustration on the human that had to be stopped was beyond evident as many times as they struck something or threw something away. And then they would simply collect themselves and move on to another. Even with the human intervention, though, millions perished as the disease ravaged the Watcha. For almost 2 solar rotations of the Watcha homeworld, 2.8 years in human times, the humans brought food, medicines, and did everything they could to save the Watcha from their grisly fate. In the end, they were not successful. In the end, the Watcha were no more. In the end, what was able to actually cure the Watcha was a genetic therapy that adjusted the Watcha at the molecular level. Doing this made it impossible for the disease to actually continue. It had nothing to feed on anymore, and it would simply die. As more and more Watcha are cured, it's clear that the therapy had a distinct side effect. The Watcha were surely still insectoids, but their exterior looks had changed to be much more human, surprisingly. This freaked out the Watcha as they didn't know what they were looking at when they looked at their own reflection. Many of them started actually going into panic attacks, too. Yet, it wasn't long before the rest of the galaxy told them, "You've never looked better." Before the humans left after curing the Watcha, the different species around the universe had a question for the humans. Why? Why would you risk so much to help another species, one that cannot do the same for you? The response was simple. Because we're human. That is what we do. And they would simply turn and walk away afterwards. Everyone understood at that moment that human cultures are actually very complex. It is a hell of a shock to see such efficient killers care so much about a distant species. Yet, if they knew what the humans had actually discovered in those 2.8 human years, they wouldn't be shocked or grateful. They'd be terrified. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me on today's chapter. Before I go, I need to send out a quick thank you to one of our newest channel supporters, the Lockeen. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you next time. This is Syntax, ejecting. While humanity had come to their friend's aid, the Vox had used the pause in the war to prepare. In that time, any Vox planet not damaged by the war went into full production. For the Vox, this meant the majority of their people would fall under the yoke and the whip. And this was their war economy, the war economy of the Vox. Every single male was given a bunch of tests to see where they would best serve the Empress. Any male of certain age ranges were immediately forced into service, no questions asked. Those better suited for manual labor or R&D were sent to specific work camps. Those with experience would train the younger military-age males to fight and die for the crown. The training was, of course, difficult and harsh, as they geared up to drive into the fire with the humans. The men sent to work did not have it any easier. 80 to 90% of their entire day was spent mining, construction work, distribution and maintenance of weapons, gear, and ships in order to facilitate the war. Many of these workers worked themselves to death, literally right there on the line, only for the body to be jostled around to see if they were still alive, then simply swept off and dumped somewhere. Once they were removed, a fresh worker would be brought in to take their place. The only reprieve either groups of men had is when they returned home to perform their additional civic duties. The female Vox had a very specific purpose. They needed to produce as many offspring as possible, as fast as possible, to fill out the ranks. To this end, females are married off young, so young, in fact, that they are actually not done physically maturing before being forced into said marriage. If the female did not produce any offspring very soon, they might in fact find themselves being brought under a different type of service, as they would find themselves being bred by multiple males when the husband is off in his work camp. Through all this, eugenics became common on each world, each one trying to show off more for their crown by forcing the population to produce more weapons, ships, and personnel. What came out of all this misery was far more advanced war machines than previously used. Along with that, eugenics born stormtroopers trained from birth to handle said weapon systems. Just about the time humanity was about to begin the war march again, the Vox charged into human territory, targeting colony, mining, and agricultural worlds. This would be used as a way to demoralize the humans and also cut them off from their supplies, which is a vital step to war. The Vox made it a point not to jam any of the videos showing their new forces tearing civilians apart they wanted the humans to see. The new Vox are larger, leaner, have new exoskeletons that protect many of their critical parts. These faster and meaner Vox would kill much, much faster, yet still pause to relieve themselves with whatever woman, man, or child they chose. As it turns out, the screams coming from the victims only seemed to delight the Vox even more. The Vox battle plan was actually very simple. Take important worlds as they push as far as they can, preferably all the way to Earth. If they can take Earth, then they can show this upstart species, along with this species' allies, who exactly runs this galaxy, whether or not they can take the planet or simply sue for peace. The plan itself was beautiful in its simplicity, yet there was one flaw that they had not realized. The humans were supposed to be one place. However, the humans were not exactly where the Vox expected. The Vox royalty believed that the humans would still be preoccupied with their mercy mission to save the Watcha. They had studied human culture and realized that the humans would always sacrifice to save their allies, or what the humans call friends. With the humans still dealing with the issues outside of their own borders with the Watcha, Earth should be far less defended, which would be true. Pushing through the first few systems, the Vox pushed hard on their way to Earth. As they did, they pushed through and damaged everything that they were supposed to, as this huge bulge on the map showed them heading straight towards the Sol Sector. As they got within one sector to clear before reaching Sol, the Vox fleet jumped into Proxima and began landing immediately. They believe all they would face are defense satellites and a few ships in orbit. What they found was, well, exactly that. For about 41 seconds. Jumping in was the fleet from Proxima that had been on its own way to answer a distress call from the neighboring system. Then the Earth fleet arrived. Then Mars, Venus, Centauri, Spartans, Hussars, War Sniper, America, Queensland, Tassiar, and on the fleets of every human system arrived, some of them vast, many of them quite small. The Vox knew that it was normal for the humans to talk before engaging, but something was off. They looked on the sensors and they could see that all the human weapons are heating up, turrets are adjusting, and drone swarms are immediately being launched. And before they knew it, torpedoes were already sent in from every direction from every single fleet. Seeing this, the Vox Admiral turned the communications on himself as he slammed one of his many arms down. "What is the meaning of this? Your culture demands that you offer peace before warfare." A human voice came in. "That was before we found out what you had done." "What do you believe we have done?" Watching the screen, he saw the torpedoes and the drones were still closing from pretty far off. Yet the huge amount on his sensors still made all the blood rush out of his face. The human voice came across, not even bothered to introducing himself. "We don't think. We know. We know that you poisoned the Watcha. You were willing to kill an entire species that was not part of this conflict. You would risk a galaxy-wide plague to end up as what? Swooping in and suddenly looking magnanimous at the end? You have no proof to support these claims." "In fact, we do. After our researchers were finally able to isolate the viral bacterium you used, it was not difficult to find the anodyne cortical isotope you used as a binding agent. There is only one planet that has this in its purest form, the pure form needed to complete your pathetic science experiment. It was from your home planet." The swarm at this point was almost within effective range of the Vox fleet. Thinking fast, the Vox Admiral said, "Even if you are successful in this space against our advanced war fleet, your forces will be mauled to the point in which you will never be able to fight a single one of our planets. Then you will face our enhanced warriors, and when that happens, your armies will fall like those of the foolish Watcha." He seemed to laugh at this, but the humans didn't laugh. Instead, the human who turned out to be the Admiral said, "Just shut up and die already." The battle kicked off moments after this, and the advanced Vox ships began to tear into the torpedo swarm and drones. Each of the Vox ships spouted now, instead of just a few handful, 2 to 3 dozen point defense systems each. Though the targeting system was only marginally better than what they had before, the sheer volume made up for it. The nimble human drones, however, were still hard to hit, but they couldn't get very close. Some got hits, but it was still far less than what the humans expected. They expected a mad rush. The armed torpedoes were also able to strike, but unfortunately it was in far less numbers. The Vox, seeing this, delighted in their success, until, that is, the ballistic rods came in. They came in at .9, the speed of light. The drones actually opened up holes in the formations, their own electronic signatures blocking the Vox from seeing the rods come in. They opened these holes just in time for the rods to yeet past the drones and not allowing the Vox to actually maneuver at all, which meant a lot of direct hits. The Vox fleet was surprisingly quick to adjust their positions as they realized that their formation is what was currently keeping them alive. All this while they constantly send ships towards the planet. As the Vox try desperately to keep the swarm of drones back, they once again see the drones move. This time, the Vox are ready as they're ready to get out of the way. The drones open up, creating giant holes this time in their formation, far larger than they need to for just a few rods to come through. As they do, the human energy weapons begin to turn the proud Vox advance fleet into molten slag in space as they drag through, slicing and melting everything. After targeting the main command ship, the Vox fall into disarray. As they do, the thinking machines now had their opening and came down onto the Vox fleet like a vengeful god. The Vox in space did not last much longer as they were torn apart piecemeal as the drones came in, firing their ordnance first, creating large holes, then ripping the Vox ships apart, then using their weapons again to slice larger holes in. All this, anyone not being covered by the swarm was being penetrated by the main guns of the human fleet. Any Vox shuttle that just happened to not get caught up in the human swarm of drones was immediately grounded, as they knew what would happen if they attempted to flee. The Vox on the ground faced a population that had been preparing for a rematch. On the initial Vox invasion, Proxima was actually caught with their pants down. Even though they were able to take out all the invaders, the loss of life stayed in their collective consciousness, and they really were hoping the Vox would come back. This time, it didn't matter that the Vox on the planet were more, shall we say, stronger, faster, better armored, and armed, as each of them carried a strange las cannon. It didn't matter as the citizens of Proxima came at them like angry flying monkeys, using large vehicles with even larger weapons. They could fire on any Vox they saw, surprising the shit out of the Vox. They believed that their new 38-centimeter thick chitin shells would actually protect them. Maybe from a glancing strike, it would just knock them over. But a direct hit still meant a spray of innards, the sounds of agonies, and the smell of that giant maggot being sprayed everywhere. They were so brutal that when the pods landed from the human fleet and the exosuited soldiers began to seek and destroy any Vox they found, what they found was the citizens already pushing the Vox bodies into hastily dug holes using excavators. The Vox did manage to secure a fairly large area, and then found out real quick what happens when drop troopers arrive and find a whole bunch of dead civilians, many of which were dead from, well, many of them didn't want to talk about it. Many of the troopers ended up using their chainsaw attachment to cause maximum pain as they tore the Vox down, or as the Vox came at them, screaming and roaring, trying to intimidate, charging straight at them. They would launch explosives down the Vox throat, usually saying, "Smile, you son of a bitch," as they launched it in, most of them bouncing off a tooth or the nose or something, causing a massive explosion on the head. Others would actually go down the throat, and many of them would say, 3 points, right before a Vox would simply pop like a pimple, which was oddly cathartic once they realized that they had just ended the Vox that had taken down so many civilians. With the battle over, the human fleets only had one way to go. They all turned towards Vox territory. Twice, the Vox have now invaded human space. Twice they have gone for Earth. Now there will not be a third time. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on today's chapter. Before I go, I'd like to send out a special thank you to a couple of my supporters. That would be SS Demon and Erica Gem. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Everyone else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntext, ejecting. Because of their transgressions against humanity and everyone else. For almost the next 120 human years, the Vox would learn why the humans try to follow the rules of warfare. When the concept is actually broken down to its base elements, there is a truly constant underlying theme. Most believe it to be to keep damage to a minimum so that the remnants, be it land, sea, air, can still be utilized. Then this goes for the population as well, as having those that have knowledge of the local area is a resource that no one likes to lose. It would be a good guess, but it'd be wrong. The base truth is so that professionals, those capable of massive destruction, don't take things personal. Because if they do, no rule, no order, no law, nor decree, or even simple suggestion would stop them from bringing holy hell down on the enemy by the most brutal and or efficient ways available, with the forces focused on the suffering of their enemies. This is what the Vox had released upon themselves. First, they had attacked the Lapin, unprovoked, and murdering and assaulting with impunity. They violated so many, it was horrific. Then they attacked like lightning, attacking every human sector at once, making the biggest mistake by attacking our home planet. Then they made planetfall on a human world, and they killed, violated, defiled, and destroyed everyone regardless of status. They did this with a focus on those who tried to save the lives of their own wounded. Even when withdrawing, they would destroy any human vessel they could reach. When the Vox needed time to rearm, as they were losing too many ships and too many personnel too fast, they sent a very virulent strain of manufactured disease to an ally of the humans, knowing fully well that humanity would stop to help. They understand this much, at least, of human culture, as humans decide to go and save the Lapin, the thing that started this entire conflict. With humanity breaking away so that they can help their allies, the Vox got their time. But they did not expect humanity to figure out the virus and the bacterium that they used, and what they had done or why they had done it. In the eyes of the humans, to use an innocent as a meat shield only brings more rage and hate from humanity as a whole. Humanity will still fight through a meat shield, but they're not going to enjoy it at all. Especially if a meat shield is slowly and painfully dying in the arms of those that had shown up to protect and save them. This drove them into a frenzy when they found out what the Vox had created. The last mistake the Vox made was their gambit to force the humans to abandon all hope and disappear off into the void. They tried this by attacking the agricultural worlds with excessive force, not realizing for a moment that you can't starve them out and you can't make them run. Instead, what happened was they brought the rage of all the human fleets into one point. As strong as the Vox are, especially with their new advanced fleets, they can't fight that many. The only smart decision was to never go after the Lapid again through this entire ordeal. With the loss of the invasion group, and with the war with humans starting in earnest, the Lapis home system was deemed far more trouble than it was worth. Yet one wise choice inside hemispheres worth of transgressions would not save them from the rage of humanity. Operation Cry Havoc reached a fever pitch, with the individual captains and unit commanders having free rein to attack as they see fit. The wolf pack of humanity's different fleets and battle groups spread across the Vox space, striking at random targets so that the Vox could not rally their forces for any sort of counterattack. The only restriction that was given to those sent into the war zone was to save the Vox homeworld for last. When jumping into a system, human ships would begin engaging the moment they got into effective range. Swarms of drones and torpedoes, with fire from the main cannons, tore into the Vox vessels and ripped them apart. It was so horrible for the Vox that many of them, out of desperation, either simply ran for it or they tried to ram directly into the human ships. Depending on which ships in the systems would define if the humans would choke the Vox with their biologicals, glass them with nukes, turn the planet itself on its inhabitants, or send pods down with incredibly pissed off, exoskeleton wearing, plasma spraying, chainsaw wielding, high caliber pumping death on two legs. As the pods came down, the Vox always tried to rush the pods, but the troopers inside went at the Vox like angry gorillas on cocaine and meth. Only those that surrendered would be spared, but the Vox would rather die than surrender, even to the point of ritual suicide, as many times the population would be found gashed open with their ceremonial blades in their hand. The humans always looked at this and goes, I guess this is something you'll find everywhere. Even with their underlying rage, it would take humanity a very, very long time to take down every Vox world, as they numbered in the hundreds. As they looked at the screen, seeing the tsunami of death, the Vox tried to flee into different territories, yet they could not, as all the other species denied entrance into their territories. Every species now knew of the Vox's plan to either exterminate or dominate every species in the universe. Because of this, being shown by the attack on the Watcha, the Vox now have no way to escape and must face their fate. For over a century, the Vox planet are taken down 1, 2, 3 at a time. Sometimes it takes just a matter of days, other times it takes years to take down a planet. It just simply takes time to take a heavy populated and heavily defended planet. But humanity took it in stride, as they would break the world so much that the very few surviving Vox are essentially left on the planet in the Stone Age. For a species that was once the most dominant, now scraping by for survival, this was a great, great insult. When humanity finally attacked the Vox homeworld, something seemed off for the Vox. The humans stayed well out of range of the massive Vox fleet around the planet defending it. It wasn't too long before the Vox realized that the humans were not trying to negotiate, as they hadn't decided to call at all. No, they were just waiting for the rest of humanity to show up. By the end, the planet was completely surrounded on all sides by humanity. The Vox, still arrogant, demanded that the humans leave, believing that their world was unconquerable even by the human fleet, as even though it was only one planet, the Vox still outnumbered them. The communications sent up that seemed to be ranting at the humans did them no favors, as a cloud of projectiles and drones and stray ballistic shots filled the space, though packed very tight in their formations, would save them from the drones and torpedoes. As this crisscrossed their lines of fire with all their point defense systems, the main gun rounds striking the Vox ships would still cause many of the ships to spin out of control and end up falling towards the planet, or they would outright explode. This explosion would result in a debris field that did just as much damage as the volleys of fire from the human ships, as many large sections of the Vox ships would slam into others. With all their preparation, the Vox only lasted 80 minutes. As the human fleet got closer, the surface of the Vox homeworld prepared for the final assault, an assault that never came. While debris fell towards the planet, the humans stopped at about 2 times the furthest lunar orbit around the Vox planet, seeing that the Vox planet has 3 moons. As they stayed in an orbit around the planet, the Empress of the Vox tried to goad the human ships into getting closer and closer, as she had an ambush waiting for them.
What is this issue, humans? After all that bravado, you still lack the stones to finish the job? I would have never figured you for true cowards. Come now. We dare you to face your own demise as you try to kill us.
The Admiral of the human fleet just echoed his voice across. There is no need. We killed you an hour ago.
Do not play coy, stupid. We know you are just afraid of our might.
If you were not so entrenched in your old culture, you just might be able to see what's happening. The line was cut as the Empress had no idea what he meant, but she did know that the humans are not in the market of idle threats. What they couldn't see, the humans could, as they orbited around. From space, the humans could see that the payload was already taking effect. A spot on the planet that was slightly south of the equator showed a strange gray spot on the reddish and purple world. This spot seemed to grow faster as it got larger. The nanomachines were eating away at the planet, creating more of themselves as they consumed more and more on the planet the more they replicated themselves. A few shuttles tried to leave the planet as they suddenly realized what was going on, but they were immediately shot down, falling back into the gray goo, some of them making quite the splash. All of them except one. This one, even before it reached the outer atmosphere, immediately began transmitting to the humans that it had females and children aboard. They began to beg for safe passage and were targeted by the humans. They would have fired on the shuttle, but the surface defenses actually beat them to it. The shuttle, realizing that there were missiles coming up, put the engines to its maximum to try desperately to escape the ordnance that was closing. They continued to ask for help from the humans and realized that they would be killed by their own people. After all they had sacrificed, the Empire would not allow them life at all, not unless it served them. All those on board held each other as they braced for the end, as they could hear the sensors beeping faster and faster, realizing that they were almost about to be hit. Then something shook the shuttle. Wait, were they still alive, they thought? They realized it was the debris from the missile that was chasing them. They looked out on their sensors and even out some of the portholes and could see a single human destroyer that had rushed in close enough to save the cargo shuttle. The shuttle was then ordered immediately to power down. When they immediately complied, they saw the destroyer dock with the shuttle and, through speakers, order all of the occupants into the cargo hold. The civilians found themselves inside the cargo hold of the destroyer and then waited there, thinking maybe they were just going to be spaced. They didn't know what was going on, but they could feel themselves moving just a little bit. It's though the inertial dampeners weren't completely working. Odd. It wasn't a long flight, and they realized that they had jumped to FTL, and then they found out that they were being lowered onto a planet. Going down onto a world through the gravity well is pretty obvious, and before they realized it, the destroyer had landed and opened the doors, and they found themselves on a former Vox world. They didn't see a single human throughout the entire flight, but now, as the gates opened, they looked at the faces of other Vox survivors. They ran out and embraced them, thankful that they had found others like themselves. Their species would actually survive, and that one joy was enough to make them just hold each other, grateful to be alive. As they looked up at the human ship that was now leaving, they wondered how a species so absolutely brutal could be so kind. It took nearly 2 weeks for the Vox homeworld to become nothing more than a shimmering ball of gray nanomachine goop. The nanomachines would now continue to consume and replicate each other forever, using a little bit of cannibalism amongst machines just to maintain this shimmering ball. It was a bit disturbing to think of a Vox even touching the goo, only to find themselves being slowly consumed by it as things seemed to melt off, digit by digit, limb by limb, body part by body part. The process itself was excruciatingly painful, as each part is chewed off by the nanomachines. Watching someone or something go through the process is true nightmare fuel, even for the humans, as many of them screeched in pain. Many humans turned away, realizing that this was just agonizing. But it's something that had to be done. When the humans finally left, they sent a message to all species that the war was over. Also, that the Vox territories were to be left alone, and isolation would be their final punishment. If they ever reached the stars again and tried to go home, they would find that shimmering ball as a warning to not go back to their old ways and make a new culture. Something less, well, stupid. True to their word, the humans returned to the council after the war was over. When the human representatives walked into the council after such a long time, they sat down in their booth, straightened their forms out, and waited for everything to start. As the council members looked at them, a group of 3 humans so nonchalant in their actions as though they had not just brought a dominant species to the brink of extinction. With everyone seemingly paused, the human rep looked up at the chancellor and simply asked, "So, new business?" On a nearly forgotten world, an old man sits on his porch, rocking back and forth. His long ears hang low as age has taken its toll. He looks out and watches his great-grandchildren and grandchildren play in the yard as they joke and laugh. The sight gives him pleasure as he looks up at the home across the street. Out of respect, this Warren has never been sold, and his family has kept the exterior very well maintained. He thinks back to the day the human used to live there, the one that saved his life and the lives of his family as well. He thinks of the human weapon that hangs on his wall, how it saved his family. Out of additional respect, it has been maintained in pristine condition just in case it may be needed again. He closed his eyes as he reminisced, and he could almost hear the voice of his old friends in his ears once more, thinking about what he wouldn't give to see his old friend again. His grandchild shook the man's arm, making him open his eyes and look down at the child. "Grandfather, someone is here to see you." The child points at the front gate. The old man looks, and there, standing with a bag over his shoulder, was Bill. Smiling and waving, Bill stood tall, not looking a day older than the last time he saw him. At first, the old man thought he was hallucinating or maybe dead, until he noticed all the children staring at this strange creature standing at his gate. The old man got up very slowly and slowly walked to the gate with his grandchild clutching on his leg. The human yelled, "It's good to see you again, Ragnar," and reached out his hand to shake it. Ragnar was hesitant to touch it. When he shook it, Ragnar said, "How? What? I heard you were... Oh, rumors of my demise have been exaggerated. Not by much, though." Ragnar shook his head for a moment, trying to clear it, and then asked, "Balthazar? And Jake?" Bill jumped in. Balthazar went back to Earth to visit his family. Jake, well, let's just say it's going to be a while before he's back up and moving again. So, that means the war is over? Yes, it does. And that means one thing. What is that? I can finally come home and see my family. Ragnar understood what he was saying and smiled wide as his wife joined him at the front gate. Bill looked at them both and smiled, happy to see them both alive. They then opened the small gate, and all the children watched as this very large and muscular creature took one step in and gave the couple a hug, whispering in their ears, "It's good to be home." For the first time in years, the grandparents' ears all raised up slowly, and this was a sign of sheer happiness. And they both simply said, "Welcome home." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you so much for finishing this story with me. I sure hope you enjoyed it. Before I go, I need to send a giant thank you to one of the major supporters of the channel, and that would be the Sir. No kidding, that's just what he calls himself, Sir. So, thank you very much, Sir, for your support of the channel. And to everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.